Welcome to the Nuclear Snail channel. This time I'm going to talk about this exoskeleton robotic arm. I'm going to show you its details, I'm going to talk about how I made it, the design principles behind it, the techniques used, and so on and so forth. And I will talk about everything that I have to say about it. So let's put the Gauss rifle aside here. There we go, good girl. So here is the arm. So as the base of this, I've used two padded armor plates made out of aluminum, so this bottom layer here, as well as here, underneath the reinforcement. Those are made using the technique from my metal armor video. If you didn't see that one, you can watch it later after this. So those serve as a base, and on top of that you see those reinforcements with those typical futuristic or modern cyberpunk, if you will, kind of cutouts. I did those on my CNC router as well as this little detail up here on this plate. But shapes like this, if you don't have a CNC router, you can also cut them out using a scroll saw, or you can just make them from another material than aluminum. So this is real aluminum, so is this, so is this. You can find ways to do this even without a CNC router. It will just take you more time and probably more effort, unless you're really good at a scroll saw. The other parts are mostly from scavenged electronics. So this custom plate from aluminum is custom, but it sits on top of the butt of an old cordless drill. So that's where the batteries used to be. If you use former battery compartments, it's important to remove the actual batteries. So this was actually is just a plastic box. And I've designed this part in such a way that it fits on top of it, repeating its shape. What this does design-wise is give the whole thing a bit more quality. Like it looks like it's maybe all metallic, or not all metallic, but maybe it's more metallic on the inside than without the top metallic plate. It's a similar principle as what I've talked about with partial armoring. So you just take a small piece of armor and it makes a lot more of the whole thing look armored than without it. This round thing right here is a piece of an old photo camera mounted on top of the lid of this electric box. I don't even know what it's called. Maybe electric redistributor box or whatever. I got them from the construction store, and the way I put the cables inside of them is the same one as for my Gauss rifle, because it also uses those as a quote-unquote energy source, or the battery compartment in the game world or in the story world. So this is again just a hollow plastic box which has sprayed black, and it's designed to accept cables. This probably looks ridiculous to people who know what it actually is, as a lot of things will, but to the most people it doesn't. So again, story told. Obviously you can also make the whole thing custom, but that again just takes a lot more time and effort. So you see, this build is a combination of custom made parts which make the whole thing look more cyberpunk, futuristic, high-tech, whatever you may call it, as well as scavenged electronics. So the look I went for was basically the mix of two. Like, there are some high technologies integrated into this arm, which is assembled by someone like myself, basically, but in this sort of a wasted, destroyed post-apocalyptic world where you have to improvise in order to succeed with your build. So the next thing you will see are those synthetic muscle fibers. Now I picked them consciously in red because people are used to muscles being kind of red or displayed as such. On a design or perception level, contributes to the viewer immediately recognizing it, or quickly recognizing it, or at all recognizing it as muscle fibers. You would also need some sort of mechanical connectors here, mechanical joints, because for example here it's also just those muscle fibers in between here as well as here. So the story on the LARP behind this is that those are controlled in a very intelligent way by the actuator, which is up here, and they basically read your arm's motion, or the thing reads your arm's motion and conveys the proper kind of smart bending into those synthetic muscle tubes. Science fiction wise or science wise, I think it would be possible, it will certainly be possible in a bunch of years, but they would still build those powered exosuits in a different way where you don't have to have such smart fibers, where it's sufficient if they just contract. You know, and for that you would need more mechanics. The reason I didn't do them here, because this being a job for a client, they just didn't have enough budget for a full set of, you know, articulated mechanics which will do biceps, triceps, delts and all that. So basically stuff like you see in, for example, Elysium or Edge of Tomorrow. That is certainly doable. Problem is it would be a lot more expensive because it would take a lot more time. Adjusting those things to move smoothly and properly. It is a lot easier to, you know, go with some suspension of disbelief in this case and say, you know what, stuff that looks like synthetic muscle fibers, let's go with that. So here you will see some additional detail. Like this. This is also done with CNC engraving. In this case, if you don't have a CNC, you can use electric etching, which is a quite easy and cheap to set up process. You will find some tutorials about it on the internet. So what this part is supposed to be, and as it says here somewhere, it is a synthetic myotube actuator, so that's basically the control unit. And this is supposed to be some sort of a battery with an input port, probably for charging. I say probably because, as you know from my channel, as far as costume storytelling goes, you just need to implement some details that might be telling a story or that are telling some sort of a story. You don't need to be super specific, as long as it kind of looks like something. You know, is the battery part in here or in here? Or is this all the battery and is this electric charging? Does it do something else or not? Like, doesn't matter. As long as it looks like it sort of makes sense, it makes sense. Like, I also don't know what this is for. Maybe it's for attaching it to something else, which is not this. Who knows? Because the whole thing looks kind of improvised from different parts anyway. Maybe it's for something else. I don't know. But it does tell the story. What it also does is serve as a visual component, which makes the whole composition pop more. So we have muscle fibers here, muscle fibers there, and we have this thing in the middle in a different material and a different color and all that. Those who watch my channel will see me repeating myself a lot about these things because they are important. Now down here we have those old keys from an old telephone, and this used to be an MP3 player, which I've then connected using this sort of flat cable, which was on the keypad. So just glued it in between the layers of this MP3 player. And what's this supposed to do is like being an improvised programming interface for your arm. That's why you see this cable right here running around here, and it goes around and it goes into the control unit here. So you program this thing using this. A bit uncomfortable to do it like that, but it's on the outside, so from the outside it looks cool. By the way, on the inside it just looks like this. It's a couple of straps with stretch, because using stretch allows me to not mess with complicated buckles and adjustment systems and all that. So this will work for a winter jacket, as well as just for a bare arm, as well as just for a combat jacket, a thin one like I'm wearing right now, without padding. Same here. So we have a stretch belt attached to this base plate, and underneath we just have this larger, wider belt for better hold and also cooler looks on the inside. But it really is like all of the detail and everything happens on the outside, because that's how you're going to be seen most. It would be possible to also include some detail on the inside of the arm, but again, budget stuff and also mobility and it getting bulky. I mean, it's already really beefy, so no need for more beef than that, like, you know, running around like this with the arm. A bit OP. Okay, so as you can see, there are some hoses here which finalize the composition. Those are pretty important. Held down here with this clamp. The only hose that is really free-floating kind of is this. And you can get caught here, yes. In a lot of robot arms, and it's not exactly criticism, it's just my personal taste. I personally don't like it when the cables in robot arms and the like are like all over the place. Like you will have a huge cable going like this. Yes, it is. I mean, I get where it's coming from, and I also like showing off the cables. But for me, it takes away a bit of authenticity and realism. Again, just personal taste, because it also just makes me feel a bit uncomfortable looking at it, regardless how authentic or realistic it's supposed to be, if the cables are all over the place and you will get caught with them. Like, obviously, what I'm wearing right now, like this net stuff and all that, I did get caught with this on Wasteland Weekend. It's not like I advocate, like, costumes that don't have any hanging, wild, fantasy-ish things at all. But as far as cables go, I just feel pain when I see cables flaring out too far. I don't know. Must be a technical guy thing. I don't know how it really comes, but that is the case. So, we also have a little retro computer cable here. I don't know how retro it is, but it's from the Computer Insides. I don't know the exact name of this anymore. But basically a broad cable like this. So this is for debugging. Like, my goal here was to give the guy who is getting this arm some possibility to LARP. So for example, he can come to a technician and go on the LARP and go like, oh, this is not working properly, and the technician can, you know, put in his multimeter prongs into this, or maybe they have an exact kind of thing to attach it to, or maybe they just hold their computer device to this and pretend like they plug it in. Basically, this gives him an ability to play on the LARP. And if you're not creating for a LARP, it still tells a story. You know, it's a conclusive story where you have this electronics unit here, and here is like its attachment port thing. Sure, you could also say like, oh, it is wireless, but I always say wear your stories openly, wear them in a way that others can see them, read them, so to say. How well can I move with this? Well, it is obviously not adding anything to my strength. It is a bit uncomfortable, but not too much. As you can see, I can execute all of the movements. The bulk of this, I don't know how much it weighs exactly, but it's kind of hefty. It does add to the realism of the movement as well. Like, you will be moving with this, like, oh, okay, you can also move fast, but he wanted it to be beefy, like it's like really strong. So it makes you feel and move the way that corresponds to what you're seeing right now, pretty much. It can get tiring after a bit. Like, I can imagine you developing one hell of a delt after wearing this for a while. I do already feel like some tension in my delt because of moving all this. And those tubes, they bend nicely. As good as this sort of tubes can bend. It's, by the way, pneumatic tubing that I got from my friend Michael. Thank you, Michael, again. This was really just on time. Like, he was just dumping stuff from his garage or whatever and was like, do you want to have this? I'm like, yep. Yeah, so those tubes do bend, but obviously it takes some force to bend them. And this being a smart myofibrous build, I don't have any trouble with having to adjust the mechanics and blah and all that, so it's good in that sense for the mobility. Although a perfectly built exosuit obviously will allow you to move freely, they do it for the movies. Again, it's doable, but it just takes a lot more effort. So let's talk again about those cables that leave this battery unit or whatever it may be. So we have one on this side, and we have two on this side. And these two cables, as I said, they really complement the whole beefy look. You know, a lot of times it's not about the actual function, but what it kind of looks like. You know that your deltoid muscles are shaped kind of like this, kind of like the muscle fibers around here. So whether or not this actually makes sense, it kind of looks like it on the first glance. Same as adding some bulk to the upper arm makes it look more powerful. Whether or not that bulk is actually doing something or would be doing something doesn't matter. You look at my upper arm and you're like, whoa, that's massive. Or at the whole thing. So it's more about visual language and less about the actual function, as I say a lot of times, but you need to connect the two for the optimal kind of build. Now you will see this little thing right here on those fibers in the middle, in the elbow. And the reason for that existing is that when it's there, it holds those fibers flat in one row. And when it does that, the only way they can flare out when I bend the arm is outwards. Before that, they would come entangled and bend inwards, which would just stop the motion or hinder it by a lot. It would be very uncomfortable. The ones on the back side don't give me a lot of trouble, so they don't have a device like this. The way it's mounted is, or will be mounted, this bolt right here, you just undo it, or you just take any sort of bolt through the multiple layers of this, like that. Then you shift the arm under the armor where it's supposed to be, feel out the place or just estimate the place, drill a hole or punch a hole, make a hole, whichever way, and this bolt goes through all the armor layers up to top, where you put a washer on it and then a nut. Simple as that. So it's basically just, the layers of the arm. Right, let me take it off. That's how it looks here. So that's separate here for this and this. So this can just remain under the armor, free floating somewhere, doesn't matter. You land it like this. And this goes, as you see, through this, up top, and you just attach it to the armor from below in a hole that you pre-punched on a height which is comfortable. Like here, I'm just having it entangle in the net, which is on this backpack rig. But ideally, yeah, also should watch out that the muscle fibers are aligned nicely. This is how you attach something like this. So you build it as a separate module and then you just plop it in with a bolt or two. Nothing complicated about that at all. It's just important to get the right height, because it needs to support the weight of this thing at the right height so that your elbow bend is at the right spot, allowing you to bend your arm. And it's obviously important to have it firmly up here, otherwise it just does this, which is not something you would want. So here it is. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next episode. If you're a regular viewer, please consider supporting me on Patreon. That's the second link in the video description. The first link in the video description is the Nuclear Snail community on Facebook, where you can post your own works or ask questions and just hang out, see cool posts from others. I will see you in the next episode. Until then, hail the snail.